Ladies and gentlemen, NPR Trump's BBC lawsuit. Then you have New York Times. Trump files $10 billion lawsuit against BBC. CNN. Trump's bizarre $10 billion lawsuit. It's so bizarre, oh my God. Hit subscribe to this channel right now, ladies and gentlemen. President Trump is going to win yet again a settlement. The BBC is going to have to settle almost certainly Trump's billion-dollar settlement spree. Harvard, Columbia, a whole bunch of law firms, very powerful law firms, or once powerful law firms. Paramount, Meta, Disney, X, all settled with Trump. You can add BBC to that very soon. Why? Because BBC America, has a dedicated audience, 73,000, but has massive digital traffic. So when they say, well, it wasn't seen in the U.S., people could have either seen the documentary via a BritBox, and there are people who have BritBoxes in Florida, or through the website. They will settle, ladies and gentlemen, almost certainly. Hit subscribe to this channel. Let's talk about ABC News settling, and then we'll get to the BBC lawsuit. Hit subscribe right now. Thank you. And go to H.A. Goodman's other channel. It's below in the description. It will be below in the pinned comment. There will be a segment up on the BBC lawsuit in, about a half an hour. So check that out. It probably about 45 minutes. It'll be up as we have this live stream running live. So, and to my super chat, thank you. Hit subscribe to this channel. Hit subscribe to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. To my super chat, thanks. Let's get started.
Breaking news, ABC News and George Stephanopoulos have reached a settlement with President-elect Trump in his defamation lawsuit. The network agrees to pay $15 million as a charitable contribution to Trump's presidential library. ABC and Stephanopoulos will also issue statements of regret as an editor's note to the March 2024 article and television segment that prompted Trump to file the lawsuit earlier this year. Trump sued Stephanopoulos after he asserted in an interview that Trump was found, quote, liable for rape in a civil case, despite the fact that a jury actually determined Trump was liable for, quote, sexual abuse, which has a distinct definition under New York law.
So that was a civil case. You can't be convicted of a heinous, despicable, diabolical, nefarious, barbaric, evil, criminal act in a civil case. I think that criminal act deserves capital punishment, but Trump did not commit that criminal act in a criminal court. In a criminal court, he was never convicted, although George Stephanopoulos and ABC News tried to deceive people and to convince people that he was. That's why they paid $15 million. CBS News also paid money because of deceptive editing to make Kamala Harris's statements more concise and thoughtful. Because had they not edited her statements, it would have been a word salad, and it might have hurt her chances even more. That's why they deceptively edited. And of course, the BBC almost certainly deceptively edited Trump's January 2021 speech because they wanted to make it seem like he actually did foment a rebellion, which of course he did not. The Supreme Court unanimously overturned the Colorado State Supreme Court when they tried to kick him off the ballot for a rebellion. So anyway, let's continue. Hit subscribe if you're new.
Staff in an email that they're, quote, determined to fight President Trump's legal threats after airing a misleading edit of his January 6, 2021 speech. Our own Jerry Baker worked at the network in the 1980s and 90s, criticizing his former employer in the Wall Street Journal, saying, quote, their orthodoxy is familiar on race, gender, and sexuality, immigration, and national sovereignty, climate alarmism, Western civilization, and international affairs. It's this very presence in the homes of almost the entire British population that makes the BBC so unsuitable for a diverse democracy. No organization should have that much influence. Here to discuss this is The Sun's own editor-at-large, Harry Cole. So rivalry aside, it's hard to imagine. I couldn't believe this. 94% of homes in Britain are exposed to the BBC, and 74% of Britons use the BBC in some way every single week. That's power. How are they wielding that power?
Well, as you've seen in the last couple of weeks, not that well. It's worse than that, Brian. I have to tell you, if you don't buy your TV license, if you don't, sign up for your teletax, you risk prison. You are forced to watch the BBC. It's not that it's people are flocking to it out of choice. It's that they are forced with criminalisation if they don't play by the rules. And so it's a remarkable British institution. There are great things about the BBC. Do not get me wrong. There are brilliant journalists there. Some of them are friends of mine. Some of them are rivals of mine. But the culture of the place is the problem. Now, it used to be just that it was BBC drama that was, in a BBC drama, the sort of bad guy in any drama was never an Islamist. It was always a right-wing terrorist. Little subtle things like that. The culture, the comedy, the right were always the butt of every joke, and that's fine. They're lefties. Okay, we get that. But it's when it bleeds into BBC News, which is the gold standard. They say they are the gold standard of world journalism. It's when that bias bleeds into the news, it becomes a major problem.
So, Harry, for example, I always watch the BBC because I get up in the middle of the night to do the show, and they have great stuff. And I just watched a great reporter do stuff in Iraq. I saw scenes in Iraq I couldn't get anywhere else and thought, wow, I appreciate that story. But what I also find stunning is that how many people seem outside of the BBC, when I watch Sky and others, absolutely happy that Trump is taking on the BBC. They want to see him go through with this lawsuit for them. They want more than just Trump's situation exposed. Can you explain that?
Well, I think they're being slightly caught up in a wider movement in Britain. There's almost the sort of beginnings of what we saw happen in America in the run-up to the election of Donald Trump. People are fed up. They've had enough. They've had enough of institutions. They've had enough of the courts, the judges, Parliament, politicians, and they see the BBC as almost an extension of the British state. And part of that backlash towards it is they're fed up with being told what to think. They're fed up with being told, what correct opinions are. And the BBC almost embodies that sort of group mindset of liberal.
So we have that, of course, in the U.S. with CNN, MSNBC or MSDNC, whatever they changed their name to, MS Now. We have the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Atlantic, Jimmy Kimmel every night. My God, it's a media monstrosity. Pulling for one political side every second of the day. Let's continue.
Smugness that is rammed down people's throats day in, day out.
It's amazing how much our issues are like your issues. Sometimes you beat us to the problem, and sometimes you're second. Another thing when it comes to illegal immigrations, since Starmer took over, they're up for these small boats coming over to your country are up about 50%. And now they're making some changes, sweeping asylum overhauls because of the people.
So this is one of the reasons you'll hear in a second why the BBC will almost certainly settle and lose the lawsuit, is that enough people in Florida, in the U.S., saw the misleading documentary, and the fact that Trump won that's not relevant. Despite the best efforts of the BBC, Trump won. Thank God. But check this out.
Now is Fox News legal analyst Greg Cherry. Greg, I think it's one of the most nakedly political things that you could possibly see in the media. It's beyond malpractice. And in my mind, by the way, I think it's defamatory in America. It's certainly defamatory in the UK, where the bar is much lower for defamation than in the U.S.
That's right. That's right, Will. You're so right. You're a lawyer. And look, in Great Britain, it's the reverse of the U.S. The burden of proof shifts to the defendant to prove they didn't defame somebody. So it favors plaintiffs. Look, here's the game. When you get caught red-handed defaming somebody, as the BBC did, well, you try to minimize the financial exposure. You offer an apology, retraction of the slander. They did that, but it does not erase the past damages that Trump sustained. When the BBC, as you showed it, hacked up the J6 video to falsely portray Trump as inciting violence, that documentary ran repeatedly over a long period of time. And in fact, they did the same thing, same videotape 2 years earlier. So that caused considerable harm to Trump's reputation, not just in Great Britain, but throughout Europe. The BBC is seen everywhere on television, social media. This was dishonest propaganda journalism at its worst.
The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head that rivals it, that's in the same manner, is the way that the very fine People clip got edited and spread around, creating a false narrative. Great. And by the way, just for the audience's edification, defamation, I think, is fascinating. And President Trump is a public figure. So in the United States, the standard is malice. Did they do it maliciously or with a reckless disregard for the truth? And look, if I'm a plaintiff's attorney, I'm looking at that going, you're damn right that's a reckless disregard of the truth.
Yeah, they absolutely knew what the truth was, and they ignored it. They edited it in a deceptive way. And the two top executives resigned in disgrace, and they removed the slander. Yet, Will, can you believe it? The network still claims it wasn't defamatory. Of course it was. It was done with actual malice. Why else would they delete it and apologize? Yet they still insist, oh, there's no institutional bias in our newsroom. That's absurd, and in fact, it's undermined by a smoking gun internal memo giving a very detailed account of the rampant liberal bias that has infected the BBC's reporting, the stories they choose to cover, the slanted way they tell those stories. They should compensate Trump and hoover their newsroom of all the faux journalists who refuse to be fair and objective.
I would say they should probably prepare for compensation. I don't know if they'll go to $1 billion, Greg, but be prepared.
It'll be a settlement likely of 16 to 20 million, maybe more, maybe less. But check this out.
And suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, they actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it.
Tonight, you are saying to our viewers that you will go forward and file a defamation lawsuit against the BBC.
Well, I think I have an obligation to do it because you can't allow people to do that.
Amid threats from President Trump that he's going to sue the BBC for its deceptive editing of his January 6th speech, we are learning the network did it a second time. Come on, BBC. The Telegraph reporting that BBC Newsnight made a misleading edit back in 2022 to make it appear like Trump was, quote, encouraging his supporters to riot. Here it is. First,
This is a lie that has been told endlessly for the past 5 years. He did not encourage anyone to commit any crimes. There is zero evidence of that. And the rhetoric he used is nothing compared to the rhetoric that Democrats have used during times of chaos and mayhem in this country when there's billions in property damage. So he actually stated, go peacefully and patriotically. The Supreme Court of the United States actually overturned the Colorado State Supreme Court because the Colorado State Supreme Court wanted to ban Trump from the ballot, and they overturned the Colorado State Supreme Court unanimously.
the BBC's edit than what he really said.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
Those two comments the BBC spliced together were made nearly an hour apart and weren't related. The BBC told us that the network, quote, holds itself to the highest editorial standards. This matter has been brought to our attention and we are now looking into it, end quote. Well, they better look a little harder. This comes after the network was forced to apologize to Trump after he threatened to sue over the first deceptive edit. The BBC also says it won't play the documentary again, because it's bogus, I guess. That's probably a good reason. But they won't pay out. Here to discuss, Jason Miller, former senior advisor to the Trump campaign. All right. Jason, President Trump just responded moments ago aboard Air Force One. We have a sound here of this. Watch this, and I want to get your reaction to what the president just said.
So the BBC has apologised and retracted the report, but they say they won't pay any compensation.
Well,
Is that enough?
We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So it ended up being 10 billion.
You're ready.
So, Jason, you've seen it all from your vantage point and your proximity to the president. But now the president's saying definitively, yeah, we're going to probably sue them next week, $1 to $5 billion, as the president tries to scratch back his reputation. That edit was so deceptive.
Yeah, it really was. And good for President Trump for following up here and not letting off. And I think one of the things that people need to really realize here is that the BBC, as you pointed out, they've only apologized once. They didn't apologize for both of the times. They apologized for one. And the fact that they came out and said after days and days of waiting that they refuse to make President Trump whole, to pay any sort of restitution, is really unconscionable. And let me explain for people at home why the BBC is in so much trouble. The burden of proof in the UK is much different than it is in the United States. In the United States, the plaintiff, the person who was defamed, the person who's doing the suing, has to prove that what was said against them is false. But in the UK, the defendant, the media outlet who made the defamatory statement, has to prove that what they said was true. Well, as you played for the audience, there was nothing true about that statement from the BBC. They wouldn't splice things together intentionally. And then the fact that you had all the BBC leadership resign or pushed out, whatever language you want to use, that's another admission of guilt. The other thing, too, as you smartly pointed out, that President Trump really has an obligation to follow through on this, to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I tell you, President Trump and even Mrs. Trump have really been on a winning streak against the fake news ever since he came back into office. And I don't see him backing off here at all.
No, nor should he. Interestingly, Parliament was quick to back the BBC. Have a look at some of this.
President Trump is trying to destroy our BBC, not because he cares about the truth, but because he doesn't want to get away with his lies.
But the lies were told by the BBC, not Trump. They didn't air his words accurately. Or in sequence, in real time. They deliberately edited his words. Those were the lies. Had they simply told the truth, everything would be fine.
Will the Prime Minister tell President Trump to drop his demand for $1 billion settlement from the BBC?
And the BBC must uphold the highest standards, be accountable and correct errors quickly. But I will always stand up for a strong, independent BBC.
Yeah. What's it like to stand up for strong, independent journalism or whatever he said versus a deceptive lie?
Right, exactly. And again, they're only upset because they got caught. They're not upset because they actually are disgusted with their own behavior. They were caught doing it. And again, for the folks in the Labour Party to go and act like their hair's on fire here, here's what a lot of people don't realize. In the UK, citizens have to go and pay a licensing fee. They have to go and spend their taxpayer dollars to fund this garbage. So they're funding actual fake news. Imagine if, we already have the PBS, but imagine if, say, for example, we had to fund, I don't know, the attacks from NBC or ABC or some of these outlets that have attacked President Trump for years now. So this is really egregious, and folks in the UK are upset, just as upset as President Trump.
So like ABC and Paramount, CBS and Meta and a whole bunch of law firms and Disney and X, they're going to settle, almost certainly. Okay, they edited to harm Trump politically. This is why Trump wins these lawsuits, because the people giving the news cannot give the news accurately. If they did, then people would vote for Trump. So they have to lie. I mean, we saw this with the Russia hoax. We saw this with Very Fine People hoax. We're now seeing it with the BBC and, all the other media outlets that settled with President Trump. You can't lie anymore about Trump if you're a media outlet. My God, this is not difficult. Just report the truth. And if people then vote conservative, deal with it.
So, two top BBC executives resigning as President Trump threatens a lawsuit over a documentary that he says misrepresented his remarks on January 6th. The BBC's version featured some of the president's remarks out of context, omitted references he made to, quote, march to the building peacefully and patriotically.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Yeah, that's important. The president said, quote,
to peacefully and patriotically. These are not the words of a madman. Again, they have to draw. These are the same people who call Trump a liar have lied continuously. Does Trump engage in hyperbole? Yeah, probably just as much as Democrats. The Democratic Party and politicians within the Democratic Party have spewed so much hyperbolic nonsense. Trump is a dictator, a fascist, a reminiscent of a 1930s and 1940s German. We can go on forever, all the absurd statements. And yet they're not held to the same standard as President Trump. But let's continue. The media cannot lie anymore. I mean, they will. Like a moth to a flame, it's the only thing they know. That they will lie by omission the best they can, because the truth actually gets people to vote conservative. That's why you've had all these stupid, like, outlandish hoaxes and, media obsessions. Trump, Russia, Trump, January, all of these things. Like, the Supreme Court routinely sides with President Trump, routinely. And all of the $500 million settlement for inflating his net worth was thrown out. Verdict. Okay, the Supreme Court will overturn the unconstitutional New York conviction. Okay, a state can't level an FEC crime at anyone. The FEC has to level, the DOJ has to level, the federal government. A state can't level a federal government crime at anyone without the federal government involved. But anyway, the point is, what media relied on the past 10 years is lies. They could not, if they just reported on Trump accurately, he'd get more votes, a lot more.
Quote, to fight like hell. Yeah, it was actually from a different portion of his remarks referencing election integrity. It's not even up for debate. Let's bring in editor-at-large of The Sun, Harry Cole. Harry, you wrote an editorial of what you did if you took over. But when you heard about this edit and you heard about the firing of two people who resigned or got kicked out, I imagine you weren't surprised.
It was the most remarkably brazen piece of editing. It wasn't as if they just, shortened one little quote in order to fit it into the documentary. They took two very distinctive half sentences, 40 minutes apart, and spliced them together in what could only be the most aggressive way to try and annoy Donald Trump. I mean, January 6th is a real bruise for him already. Then to sort of punch that bruise so nakedly on the eve of an election as a foreign media outlet, I mean, I'm not surprised that they're reaping what they sow. And from what I hear, they're preparing for one almighty grovel ahead of Friday's 5 o'clock deadline for legal action.
As you know, the president's had a lot of success going back at our media companies, and he takes the money that he wins. He's putting it towards his library. He's suing you. He's suing the BBC, government-sponsored television. BBC came back and said this about the edit. We accept that the way the speech was edited did give the impression of a direct call for violent action. The BBC would like to apologize.
Why on earth would they admit that, knowing that he would then sue them for $10 billion? They actually admit the edit gives the impression of a direct call to violent action. I mean, it's like, okay, now you've had how many millions of people seen the documentary actually believe that Trump tried to foment a rebellion, which was not the case. He didn't call for anyone to commit a crime. This is complete nonsense. It's, if anything, it's the Democratic Party and media, when buildings were set ablaze, said, oh, it's fiery but mostly peaceful. Literally, CNN, a journalist, was in front of a building in flames. And, oh, it's fiery but mostly peaceful. Mostly peaceful. As buildings, crumble in the background. I mean, it's like one of those like memes. Like, there's nothing to see here. That one from what was it? Not Police Academy. Anyway, let's continue. Naked Gun.
For that era of judgment, there is an increasing need for the public to be informed in a way that's impartial, truthful, and is based on evidence that they can trust. That is the sacred job of the BBC. That's what they say. But what is it like watching it every day? Do you think that they have that mantra to be fair and balanced?
No. I think they thought that Donald Trump wouldn't win. They were doing their utmost to stop that from happening by making this documentary on the eve of polls, and it's blown up in their faces. But this scandal, Donald Trump and that edit is the tip of the iceberg in a much wider scandal that is rocking the BBC. The BBC would quite like all the focus to be on the Trump thing, because it ignores the fact that in an independent report paid for by the BBC and then buried by the BBC for months, Michael Prescott, a former journalist who was brought in to look at standards across the BBC, found gross failings in their Arabic services, peddling Hamas propaganda day in, day out without checks. They've been wholesale taken over by the militant trans lobby, and they are pumping out we don't need to go through all the nonsense and garbage that we come to expect, but it was taken as gospel. These were all in the same report. Right. The Trump stuff's getting the headlines, but actually the rot goes far, far deeper than that.
So, Harry, here's the thing. If Israel looks around, and they haven't been perfect, but they look around after October 7th, they take action. They wonder, why is their integrity, why is their profile dropping? It's because there's a collusion among these networks to do the same thing, whether it's protests on the campuses blaming Israel, or in New York City, or it's networks like and corporations like the BBC making sure the Palestinians look like the victims here, not the Israelis.
Absolutely, and it's victim blaming, essentially. It's taking the gospel of the so-called, Gaza-run health ministry, the Hamas health ministry, as if they can do no wrong and anything they say is true without verifying it, yet everything that Israel say is greeted with a much heftier dose of skepticism or even just ignored. Now, I don't think this is it's tricky. Your gut instinct says this must be deliberate, or is it the fact that these organizations are staffed with younger, liberal people who genuinely cannot see this bias? And that's, I think, the problem the BBC has.
Well, I think this gentleman is brilliant. I also think that the liberals that staff the wonderful, morally superior liberals at the BBC and CNN, they know very well, or MSNBC, they know very well that their bias is oftentimes incorrect, but they don't care. It's political tribalism. It's not only that they believe that they're right, but when they know that they're wrong, they think that there's a greater good in continuing to peddle lies because their side must win. So it's a combination. They're ideologues, but also they understand when they're wrong. They understand when they're deceptively editing, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump's speech for political purposes. And any egregious or criminal act is or unlawful or act that goes against protocol is justified by, well, our side has to win.
Is that at the moment the people at the top have been trying to call some of this out. People have been saying there's something deeply wrong here, and the reaction from BBC staff is to hound out anyone who's vaguely conservative from the organisation, proving their liberal bias by sort of going on this witch hunt on anyone that calls them out for it. It's almost Kafkaesque, and they're in a doom loop if they can't get a grip on this soon. And crucially, as you mentioned there, it isn't an ordinary media organisation. When Donald Trump sues the BBC BBC. He's suing license fee payers. You go to prison, you are threatened with a criminal sanction if you continually refuse to pay your TV tax in the UK. And so that money won't be coming from a corporation, it won't be coming from shareholders, it'll be coming from British people. And that's why this row is so toxic, because it gets into the diplomacy of the special relationship in Britain, because it's hardworking Brits that are going to have to pay the price for this one.
Harry, and you wrote an editorial of what you would do if you took over. It's definitely worth reading.
Has its own news alert. It's not backing down after President Trump threatened to sue the British broadcaster for up to $5 billion after it
So it's now $10 billion. And here's the issue. Why do news organizations edit? Why must they edit Trump's speeches or Kamala Harris's interviews? Why must they do so? Well, it's obviously to push people towards one political side, the liberal political side.
He edited remarks he made on January 6th. In an email to his staff, the BBC's chairman says they are, quote, end quote, determined to fight. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Kayleigh McEnany. Also joining us today, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, Marie Harf, former State Department spokesperson under the Obama administration, also a Fox News contributor, and Jeremy Hunt, Veterans on Duty chairman and former Army intelligence captain. Great to have them both, all. President Trump's battle against the BBC is on. And just as a reminder, here's what the BBC made it seem like the president said versus what he actually said on January 6, 2021. Watch.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight.
Don't you love the ominous theme music? Oh, like they would. Okay, that theme music would never be played if Biden was speaking and you could, like, there were subtitles and you could, follow the bouncing ball and, you could kind of make out what he's saying, kind of, sort of. But that theme music that alone is indicative of just the bias, the immense bias. It's the same thing also when you see these old these documentaries by PBS or NPR, and it's always like, the Republicans decided to veto the bill that would help all the underprivileged and poor people. The Republicans did that. And it's like, they're not talking about how the Democrats allowed the poverty to persist for decades, maybe caused the poverty with their failed policies. But anyway, let's continue.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss is joining the chorus of voices who are cheering on Trump.
There are lots of people in Britain who are cheering President Trump on and who want him to sue the BBC because they're a huge problem. They've lied, they've cheated, they've fiddled with footage. There is a lot of excitement amongst conservatives in Britain at the moment that President Trump is actually taking the BBC on. I want to see him progress with this legal suit because I don't think they've been held to account. I bet they carry on printing and publishing and broadcasting fake news, not just about the president, but about the MAGA movement, about the changes that are going on in the world, which many of the British public want to see here in Britain.
Do not get a
He has already issued an apology and a statement. Actually, they issued more than one, but this was written. While the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there was a basis for a defamation claim. End of quote. Meanwhile, the BBC is tapping.
War and peace. Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Happy New Year to everybody here. Thank you so very much. War and peace. Thank you.
a known Trump critic to headline a lecture titled Moral Revolution. Jeremy, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, for too long, major media companies, whether it be BBC, ABC here in the States, have distorted the president's words. They have intentionally lied about what he has said, all to get across their own agenda and to push their own agenda on their viewers. And what happens when you call them out? Well, they might issue a retraction. They might send a little apology letter and say, oh, we're sorry if this happened. They might send out a little tweet. But what President Trump is doing, he is actually saying, no, that's not enough. We're going to hit you where it hurts. We're going to go after your pocketbook. And so now he's actually getting these huge settlements, not because he needs the money. President Trump doesn't need the money. He's doing it on principle to make sure that these companies know that you're not going to get away with this anymore. So I think it's the right move that he's doing. I think it's great to take this show on the road over to England now and go after BBC for the same type of stuff that has happened here in the States. I applaud the former prime minister for being on the right side of this.
Kelly, this isn't a matter of the president finding something rubbing him the wrong way. They changed the facts on a day that divided the nation, that the world was watching by the way that they edited this. It wasn't just unartful, it was fraud.
Yeah, they combined two statements that were about an hour apart. And then they left out the words peacefully and patriotically. President Trump said march peacefully and patriotically. So it totally changed the meaning of what President Trump was trying to say. And I'm glad we're going to see some semblance of accountability here. It's important. British citizens pay $230 a month for the BBC. So imagine if you are a...
Can you imagine paying $230 a month for CNN? I mean, it's part of a cable package, but it's like you can choose, I mean, like 100 channels or whatever, 200 channel, whatever. Could you imagine? Could you imagine?
A right-wing citizen in the United Kingdom, and you look and here they've edited President Trump. Maybe you don't particularly care about that. He's not your president there, but I'm sure you care about other issues. You care about the fact that an internal report at the BBC by an individual named Michael Prescott, who is an independent advisor to the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards board. You care that what he found was that the BBC was overly sympathetic to Hamas talking points. They were carrying water for Hamas on the issue of Gaza. You care that they misled you. They had what he described an LGBT plus reporter censoring coverage of the trans debate. So it's not just President Trump. It's a wide panoply of issues. And you have $230 a month going to the BBC. Yeah. If you're in the United Kingdom, that's a huge chunk of money, and you deserve fair and honest reporting and maybe not state-sponsored media.
Well, it's actually more expensive over there because it's pounds.
Yeah.
Right? So what is that, like 300 something?
It's a year, I should say. So.
All right, Marie.
It was interesting.
Oh, a year. Okay. But still, you have to pay, let's say you have to pay $300 a year for CNN. Why? What, would you do that?
I was watching the BBC, the version we get here in the States on Friday, and every hour they led with the apology and they played the correct footage. Like, they are clearly worried about this, I should say. They were leaning into it, not just putting out a written statement. Look, conservatives have been going after the BBC for some time in the UK. This is a sort of conservative bugaboo there in terms of their own media. I think it's incredibly stupid what they did. I think what Donald Trump did on January 6th is bad enough without editing it. By doing that, they take
aside, I mean, it's like, it was terrible what happened. What Trump did, I don't know what he did that was bad enough. Having it to begin with, a protest to begin with, yeah, that wasn't smart. But he didn't foment any protest. But anyway, let's continue. I mean, any violence. Let's continue.
away that piece of the debate and they make it about them. They'll be getting a new chairman at some point. There's some names out there in the mix that have pledged to make this a better organization because they do have a long history. The last thing I will say is that I don't think media have figured out how to deal with Trump yet. Right? I mean, the CBS lawsuit, most legal experts said Trump would have lost. But CBS preemptively gave him a settlement.
Most legal experts are usually wrong pertaining to Trump.
About a 60 Minutes edited interview with Kamala Harris. And then he did 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, and they also edited the interview they aired. So there's a lot of media organizations preemptively settling these lawsuits.
If they edited something that Trump said it was either to hurt him, definitely not to help him.
Which I think Trump realizes is a good tactic for him, but which concerns me a lot about our media companies giving up their ability.
So do you think the BBC can?
Yes, the media companies have now given up their ability to deceptively edit Trump and hurt him politically. Yes, this is could be viewed as terrible, probably a very good thing, but let's continue.
Win this?
I think,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not a lawyer, but I actually think they have,
you weighed in on the other one,
from what I've read, I think that they have a pretty good case, and they have vehemently apologized.
Yeah, BBC has a fantastic case. They took two clips, 40 minutes apart, and made some other deceptive edits to harm him politically, and then admitted to that. And this is after all of these $100 million plus settlements, and then X, Disney, Meta, Paramount, ABC. But yes, very good case, fantastic case. You couldn't have a better case.
The people that were in charge have gone. They're going to have new leadership, and I don't know that
That vehement apology started after they issued that statement. They had issued one statement, and they started to feel the heat.
It's just
I would
stupid
say.
of them.
But the course correction didn't happen until you had the leaked memo, and the BBC wouldn't be apologizing unless they were facing $1 billion lawsuit.
$5 billion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's $5 billion now.
$5 billion lawsuit from President Trump. And he has to do this because he's trying to get the media to course correct. I mean, President Trump's probably the most lied about politician, maybe in American history. You've looked at all these. He's also been censored, his accounts suspended from social media as well. So he has to do this to try to get the media to tell the truth. And to Kayleigh's point, when you remove peacefully and patriotically and then you plug in fight like hell from 54 minutes later, yeah, editing happens, but it was done maliciously. It was done in a way to defraud. It was dropped a week before the 2024 presidential election. What do we think they wanted to happen? Right? And you talk about these edits. You look at what CBS did to Kamala Harris. They edited it to make her look more coherent.
Which was a big job to begin with.
A big job to edit to begin with. And then you look at what the BBC did to President Trump. It was to look like he was trying to, encourage this, rioting and dangerous things that happened on January 6th. And the last thing I'll point out is that when President Trump talks about the media being the enemy of the people, it is. I mean, you go back to the whole lie.
The media lies by omission when they don't overtly lie. More often than not, they'll tell the truth, but only part of the truth. Or they'll deceptively edit, or they will be, they'll have sources within intel agencies to help foment hoaxes that are legitimized by mainstream publications and cable stations and news organizations. So it's, media used to be apolitical, pretty much apolitical. Like if you can you look at 2000, go and find, there's like a DVD of Bush v. Gore in 2000, and it was like CNN didn't know who won. They thought Gore won. Then I was like, wait a second. And the anchors were not crying. People weren't crying. They weren't emotional. It was just like, oh, okay. Oh, well, oh, now Bush won. Oh, okay. So, and I think Bush is the worst president of all time. But the point is, and I love Trump. Okay, that's the difference between a never Trump Republican or a person like myself who used to be on the left and now loves President Trump. There's media picked a political side for 10 years. That has actually helped President Trump in a very bizarre way. Made him stronger, more powerful. But let's continue.
About Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, that led to this war on cops. You look at the lies about Charlottesville, it led to Americans thinking that President Trump supported the neo-Nazis and the KKK, despite explicitly condemning them. And then you look at stuff like this with January 6th, they want Americans to think that he's a fascist, et cetera, et cetera. So the media is the enemy of the people, and he has to sue them to get them to course correct.
I don't agree that the media are totally the enemy of the people. I'd like to say that I'm not.
Well, the mainstream media say the
so I'm going to hang on to them if that's okay.
Media.
So I don't think media is the enemy of the people. I think that media, by and large, lies by omission, which hurts the country. So, anyway, let's continue.
Spoken out about the unethical editing of the Kamala Harris interview by 60 Minutes.
Terrible.
But you go a step further and you say CBS should lose its license. Why?
Sure. Well, I've never seen anything like it. She gave a horrible, incompetent answer on a news program. It's not an entertainment program. They call it news. They say it's a #1 news program. And so she gives an answer that shows that she's dumb or incompetent or something wrong with her. It's so bad that the people at CBS say, we're not going to do a little editing, like the word "the," make it there, something. You understand? They take the whole ridiculous answer out, and it was a long answer, and replace it with a much shorter answer that she did having to do with a totally different subject, which also didn't make sense, but it wasn't as incompetent.
The head of
they
the
don't
FCC,
do that with me.
But the head of the FCC says we would never yank a license because a politician didn't like his or her coverage.
Well, this isn't a politician. This is nothing. Wait a minute. She gave an answer. They took the answer.
I said I've been critical of it.
Listen to this.
By the way, on H.A. Goodman's other channel, there's an upload that just dropped right now. So definitely either now or after this segment, go to H.A. Goodman's other channel. It's about the BBC lawsuit.
They took, just for your audience, you know about it.
All right.
They took the answer out in its entirety, and they put a completely different answer in that makes her look like she's normal, okay, which is about the best you're going to do. And I said, I think it's the worst thing she's done. Now, what we're doing is we're going to subpoena their records because we want to see how much else did she do. And I can tell you, I've done 60 Minutes many times, and they do with me different. They take sentences out. In other words, I'm more honored by that. But I'll have a paragraph that is a great paragraph, and they'll make it less good by just taking things out. But that's different. That you can sort of say they want to make the program shorter. You know, they always say, well, we want to shorten it up. They take a great paragraph and, they make it okay. But with her, I've never knew anyone would do this. They took the whole thing out and they put a whole new thing in. I've never seen anything. I think it's the biggest scandal I've ever seen for a broadcaster. In 60 Minutes, no, I think 60 Minutes, I think it should be taken off the air, frankly.
You posted this.
And by the way, 60 Minutes, they also, when I had an argument with Leslie Stahl, now very famous, about the laptop, she said it was Russia, but I never got an apology.
You posted the following. Kamala should be investigated and forced off the campaign, and Joe Biden allowed to take back his rightful place. Investigated for what?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. Are you talking about 60 Minutes?
No, these are your words, so I'm asking you.
Let me tell you. They should look into it. Investigate. I'm investigated all the time. I'm the most investigated human being in history. They should investigate her. Look, on 60 Minutes, they say it was her campaign that forced them to do that. So certainly that should be investigated.
It sounds like you missed Joe Biden.
No, I think Joe Biden was. I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, and I think he might have done better than her. I mean, if you take a look at the polls now, I mean, I can't tell you exactly, but it looks like I'm winning and winning pretty easily. But we'll see. You have to get out the vote. But no, I think what they did to Joe Biden was a threat to democracy. To use their term. He had 14 million votes. They went into his office. He had a debate with me. He didn't do well. His poll numbers went down. And that's okay. That can happen. And they went in and they said, you're not running anymore. We're taking it away from you. They took away the presidency of the United States. I don't even like using the word coup because a lot of people don't exactly understand.
So the absurd notion is that they just found out Biden had cognitive issues they didn't know before the debate. My God, you've never seen more lying and scheming. Scheming, that's the word. What's a synonym for scheming? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you all. I'll be back tonight, probably around 9 p.m. Eastern or so. I will be back this evening for a live stream. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. For that upload, it's about 5-minute condensed version of what you just heard in close to an hour. Be here tonight at around 9, everybody. God bless you all. Thank you. Merry Christmas to all of you, and happy holidays to all of you, and Happy New Year to all of you. And I will see you this evening. Check